Hey, thanks for tuning in today. We're going to go a little sixth sense, not quite I see dead people, but close. Because when you're leading through a crisis or emergency or through chaos, my question is, do you really see your people? Not just their names on the org chart, but the state they're in, their energy levels, their emotional bandwidth. How are they doing? What capacity do they have? Because if you can't see them, I don't think you can lead them. And if you can't lead them, then how are you going to get out of this situation as fast as possible? Leadership today isn't just about scaling. It's about navigating constant uncertainty, market disruptions, and high-pressure decisions. If you're dealing with chaos, bottlenecks, and relentless pressure, welcome to the Business Emergency Room. I'm not the only one saying this. In a normal situation, according to Gallup, only a quarter of employees, or actually even less than that, it's 24%, feel their employer cares about their well-being. That's down from being closer to 50% before COVID. And 46% of employees have left their job because they felt unrecognized or unseen. And only 1 in 4 employees say that, or not only, 1 in 4 employees say that they're underperforming due to unresolved workplace tension. So this is in a normal workplace situation. And you can imagine that if you pile on the stress and dynamics of a volatile and fast changing situation, then those numbers get worse quickly. So if your people feel invisible and disengaged and disconnected, you won't just struggle to recover, you'll start slipping behind, and you won't be able to tap into their capacity and capability. So why does this matter? Well, in any business, your people, of course, are your biggest asset. And when you're facing market chaos or operational crisis or unexpected change, how quickly you recover depends on how well you can tap into your people and their capacity and capability and can get them engaged. The challenge is that in chaos or in turmoil, we often default to structure, right? When the unexpected happens, our comfort is to go back to what we know. So we have a situation in our hands, and what we do is we go back to the org chart. I've done this. We all do this. The challenge is maybe mainly in the financial arena. So we go to our CFO and say, okay, what are you going to do it? Or what is the solution here? And we look at the usual suspect. But the challenge is that the structure that works in calm waters might not work in the storm. Often the challenges at hand are not a single dimension, right? So they're multidimensional and they require involvement from different parts of the organization and potentially parts of the organization or capacity or capability that you don't have quite resourced in your conventional model. So the challenge on top of that is also that maybe your top operator, who you would normally go to, is tapped out, or maybe your most senior leader is frozen, or part of the challenge is that you've lost that individual. So there is a gap in or one or more gap in your organizational structure. And meanwhile, maybe someone else, maybe quieter or newer, or maybe more in the second row, might have capacity to lean in and lead. What this episode is about, that if you truly are seeing your people, then in crisis or in situations that are not normal, you can tap into the individuals that can actually help out and lean in and help you create the breakthrough. So we're going to break that down today, and let's start with a practical framework, because seeing your people might sound a little creepy, but by seeing your people, I mean, do you see what I call their vitals? Yes, I made an acronym. I love acronyms. It's a quick diagnostic that you can use to assess anyone. So you can use this for at an individual level or teams. I suggest you also in these situations check out critical partners, because regardless of what it says contractually on paper with any partners or collaborations you have, you also need to look at these people as individuals or a group of humans and actually see them in order to assess whether what's on paper might actually be realistic considering their emotional state, yeah, and energy levels. So here is what the acronym VITALS stands for. The V is for vibe, so mood or energy. Are they in the green? Are they there and present, or are they withdrawn? Right, opposite of steady. Clearly busy with what's happening in their own heads. Listen to people's tone of voice, people's body posture. You do know from your own friends and family, we all have learned to recognize the signs whether somebody is doing well or not doing well, and you don't necessarily need to know why. And it could also be entirely that people are not doing well because of reasons that have nothing to do with work. But you do need to know whether somebody already looks at somewhat at the end of their tether, or whether they generally appear to be still doing in a good state, right? Decent energy levels. Then the other thing to look for is inquisitiveness. So are they listening? Are they still curious? Are they asking questions? Or are they the opposite of that and potentially so overloaded and so busy with the situation in their head that they cannot tune into the moment to actually figure out and listen and learn about what's going on in this particular situation? Where do they stand in terms of trust? Is there any signs that these people, maybe because of the current situation, maybe because of history, maybe because they don't trust the partners or the politics or anything else that have caused the situation, where are they at the trust level? Are they still willing and able to trust you and trust the organization? Do they feel safe to speak up? Or are you dealing with individuals who are hurting at the moment because that trust has been breached and maybe will not engage from a place of trust, or are going to be unable to engage from a place of trust? Where are people when it comes to alignment? So the A is for aligned. Do they have the capacity to see the bigger picture? Do people have the energy and the bandwidth to understand what's going on and where you're still trying to head? And when they respond to anything, does that response show alignment and understanding of what the destination is and what success looks like, or what it is that you're trying to achieve? The L in vitals is for leaning in. Are they not just hearing and seeing the situation, but are they also leaning in, contributing thoughts, ideas? Are they generally in their day-to-day work still taking on tasks and delivering? Is things coming? Are things coming out of their hands, or has everything stalled? So are they leaning in, or are they leaning out? Are they engaged, connected, or have they been, and are they unengaged and leaning out and kind of in the wait and see space? And then last but not least, how supportive are they? Are these individuals, or is the team in a space where they're supporting each other, where they understand how and are still collaborating with other departments, or have they become a silo? Have they become inward turned, and are they so busy with themselves that they're maybe disappearing from view, and no longer really have that capacity to give or to also see how their piece connects to others? So vitals, and for each of these letters, all I'm looking for is for you to mentally kind of mark it a green or yellow or red, because that's a quick way for yourself to have a look at where's my organization at, and where in my organization currently, or where in my team, which of these individuals is more in the green and is probably, particularly in the early days of the situation, somebody I can lean on or pull into my team to actually work out of it. Those who are in the red totally need to be in the no. They need to be engaged. They need to be, but those are not typically the people that I see in these unexpected situations with the capacity to step up. And potentially also they're even going to throw up roadblocks with whatever gets suggested or done. So the trick is that you need to tap in some of your green energy level people, right? People who are in the green zone when it comes to their vitals check, because those are the people that can start to get things moving. And typically what you then see as things progress and calmer and become clearer, people who are maybe more in the yellow start to trust and start to see it, and so find it easier to become aligned, and so their vitals start to shift, and they become engaged, and the red wave will come to. Although inevitably, if people truly are in the red spectrum, that's not the quickest space to get out of, right? So it depends also on how long it took them to get there. That's a whole different episode talking about burnout and stress. Because yes, if somebody is on the trajectory to burnout or is there, then they likely show up on the red side of things here. And yeah, that's a whole different story how to deal with that. So let's not go there. This is about in that moment figuring out who you can actually engage and expect to support things. So somebody whose vibe is steady and who keeps the mood calm, definitely a green. Someone who's sharp and flat and emotionally volatile, red. Yeah. Somebody who's inquisitive and who's asking what's next and what's needed, definitely a green. But if they stopped asking and gone silent and just nodding along, that's probably yellow at least, or maybe even red. Trust is huge. If you're, people say, how do I know that they trust me? But right? You know, when there's things being said in your organization that never make it to you. One of the things that I see a lot is going back to our default is to go with the hierarchy we have. This is typically a time where I say, well, if you're top person because they've been carrying the load, or this or this situation has been barreling down on you, right? Because the reason you're in turmoil is not because of one little thing. The reason was that you were already running on your toes most of the way because the world is changing and shifting so quickly, and you're trying to keep up with everything, and you're trying to keep your business going, and you're trying to grow at breakneck speed. And so then one last thing happened, big or small, that kind of tipped things into disarray. And so your individuals or your team members, your teams have already been stretched in some departments more than others. And in some cases, the battery is simply empty. So if you're trying to climb out quickly, it's quite often the case that your various leads have taken on a lot on their shoulders. And so it's not uncommon to assess a lot of your direct leads in the red, unfortunately, right? And so I think, to me, this is also a good way to become clear that usually their second in command is not always also quite there. And I typically see that these people are very useful in crafting a plan to get out. So stop thinking in terms of structure, but think in terms of fitness for purpose in the moment, because it might also be more helpful to keep your senior leads on keeping things ticking over, and then take their second or their third out to deal with the unusual, because that doesn't always immediately disrupt that whole team by taking their time away from that steady state setup. So, talking about these kind of examples, there are creative ways to use your people more effectively or beyond the org charts. And so some of these examples are shifting decision ownership temporarily, so delegating certain decisions to lower or different levels or different individuals in the organization. The other thing to do is that you can pair high trust juniors with overburdened seniors. So particularly if you're clearly able to communicate and identify that somebody being overloaded is not their personal doing, is because typically what you is actually very clear and visible very quickly when you dive into these situations is that there's been so much change that these roles have become exponentially bigger, or the umbrella they tried to cover, you know, became bigger, or there was more interdependent, complex decisions that landed on people's plates. And so, acknowledging that the role has become so much bigger and kind of crept, and that's been a slow creep instead of very obvious and hence not dealt with, then putting somebody with them to at least alleviate some pressure whilst you're figuring it out, can spread the workload and preserve resilience, and also buy you some time. And if that's something that you do on a more start doing on a more generic basis, or regular basis, then that can really help create some flexibility in your organization. And trust me, your junior staff will love it. I haven't met many people, young people in organizations, who said no to any kind of broadening assignment, even if that doesn't come with extra money. Being able to look up a level or look sideways into other kitchens is always attractive if you're figuring out where your career path is going. So it also does well with regards to the statistics, right? We talked about earlier in the episode about job satisfaction. What also can help, and in these situations specifically, but also I think can be a steady state solution, is to do some cross placement. So if you are in a fast growing setup, then having somebody from the supply chain team, for instance, who sits 2 days a week, is 2 days a week co-located with the operations team, even if they then largely do their own work, just sitting next to people and overhearing the challenges and the direct discussions taking place, and being a listening ear in some of their conversations or their meetings, they will start to hear things that are relevant to supply chain that maybe never make it to them, right? So doing some cross placement, particularly when the situation is very dynamic and fast changing, can really help pick up with some of the disconnects, because people self-filter so much in what they share. Then I'm a big believer in creating short-term task forces. It's also something I help a lot of clients with after the initial triage. If we establish that topic A needs tackling, and there is actually capacity internally, but it sits a bit dispersed over the organization, and we find some individuals who can be freed up, who've done this before in a different place, in a different organization, or who have a passion around fixing the subject and have the energy to do so. Putting people together with a really clear set of a really clear problem to solve, some clear boundaries, and some clear accountability, can really generate some fast results. And the ability to put teams like that together, even if you don't adopt a formal the formal Lean or Six Sigma structures, or other rigid structures like that, if you create your own ability to have these quick task forces to tackle implementations, changes of a smaller nature, but that need to go across the business, training that muscle can be very useful, both in the moment and in the long term. And then repurposing support staff. It's amazing how much of some of these integrated projects actually really require somebody who can look at the integration and at the project management. You already have a whole organization full with subject matter experts. So somebody who is support staff and works in a support function and is maybe not as intimately familiar with the specifics of your product, or your manufacturing process, but who is a good communicator and a good coordinator and a good project manager, can potentially take on some of these tasks in overloaded departments, because the people that they will be steering know enough, have enough subject matter expertise about the process or about your product, that that's not what they need. What they need to bring to the table is the integration and the communication and the joined up delivery. And you have people in your organization that are currently not assigned to do that work, but who have that capability because they've done it before, or if they've done it elsewhere, or they have an above natural ability to integrate and put stuff together and communicate it or coordinate with a clear set of marching orders, are just really execution oriented. And that's all that project team needs. So if you identify that you need some of that skill or capability, go shopping around in your own organization, because you'll be surprised how much you sometimes don't know about your people's previous experience or other strengths that they may not need for their current role on a day-to-day basis, but that they can bring in a moment to the situation. And last but not least, you also build flexibility with trusted external partners, and you have them. You've used them in different jobs. Sometimes it's ex-employees who now work for themselves, who can come in for a couple of days here or there to help with situations. Sometimes it's specific consultants or advisors. If you need that temporary gap closure, get it, because the more time you don't actually get the hands on board that you need and the people ready and able to go at it and work, the longer your drift takes, right? And the longer it takes to recover and get back on track. These strategies don't just apply to major crises, but they're the ones to tackle it. I think in today's volatile world, using VITALS as a rhythm check helps to stay ahead of pressure buildup, and it creates a more adaptive and responsive culture. But by all means, this is not easy. When I say, hey, I want you to see people, I don't want you to see dead people. If that makes you happy, maybe, but I don't want you to see dead people, but I want you to see your people. But I also know that that's not so easy. If your team is large or it's fast changing, or you work in an industry and a type of people that attracts less chatterboxes and less not as many very open and transparent types, or if you're not always co-located, you have a lot of stoic or close personalities, or you yourself are very stressed and spread thin. That vitals check that I talked about, this is not a thing for which you need everything. You need to know everything and all the details about the people in your organization, right? If you really actually look at individuals, I think you can answer a lot of these questions. But you also don't have to do it alone. If there's really been a huge buildup, and you're really not so sure whether in the current situation you can climb out by yourself, or whether you need to bring in some specialists to tackle certain things, when you really need a deeper dive, then you can bring in an external consultant like me to have a more thorough look at where everyone's at and what can be done, and what capacity you maybe have left to work things and to figure out smart ways to plug the holes in the system. But most of us also have trusted internal partners that we don't always use. So I'm thinking, for instance, of your HR lead. In this situation, engage them. They typically know your organization or the people in your organization better, but also differently. And yes, they will know the restrictions from a privacy perspective, but if you want a second pair of ears and eyes, then that's, for instance, where I would go. Or other people who engage with most departments. If there is somebody else in the organization who's at a senior level, who's generally quite well liked and maybe very different than you are, that's who I would consult, because ultimately we also look at other people with our own frameworks and with our own biases. And so asking somebody else for their verdict to kind of say, like, okay, I'm thinking to ask this person, how do I navigate it? I'm reading a situation that I cannot put more here at the moment. So we need to respectfully deal with that at the moment, but find somebody else to take up. And I'm thinking this or that. How are you reading this? And then have the conversations with the individuals involved too, right? Don't make decisions for people. There's nothing worse than decisions being made for you. So read the room, read your people, assess them, and then start the conversations open and honestly to say, hey, this is where we're at. This is what I want to get done. I was starting to think along these lines. What do you all think? How can you help me out? Seeing your people, vitally important, because when the storm hits, you cannot rely only on the org chart. You cannot rely that going back to what everybody's supposed to be doing is going to be the solution to the problem. You're going to need extra energy to climb out of the hole. So you need to get it from somewhere. You need to probably resource some functions or resource some scope that is currently not part of your operation. So you need people who are geared up and ready to take that on. And so seeing your people to see who to tap into and who to pull away from their day-to-day job to help you, and who can be that first energizer to help create the first few, get through the first few steps so that the others start to follow, is based on you being able to see and identify who is best placed to be there and do that. So I hope you see your people. I hope you'll use the vitals check, and I hope you will give me a call if you could use some help getting this done. Something we'll get better at doing it more and more. It's a muscle we can train, but extraordinary situations sometimes need extraordinary help. I'm here if you need me. Thank you for tuning in this week, and I hope to see you or hear you back next week. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to the Business Emergency Room. If today's episode hit home, let me know. Leave a review and tell me what challenges you're facing. Your feedback helps shape future episodes. So drop a comment or a message on LinkedIn with what's keeping you up at night.